Este micrófono, Asana, te permite hablar.
Se escucha.
Sin embargo, tienes que estar mirando a la cámara cuando vayamos a empezar. Entonces, no sé si dejamos 2 sillas o doctora Maite.
Oh, I can be your presidente y siento ahí para que. Okay.
Sigan ellos con la conversación.
Sí, or yeah.
Hello, good morning. Today we will take a conversatory about academic journals. The Universidad Externado de Colombia Library and the Centro de Idiomas is proud to have 2 important experts about academic journals, like Professor Dan and Professor Luis Orozco. With me is Professor Asana. So Asana, thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, and welcome to this conversation about digital and print journals. Over the last years, increasingly in Latin American universities, there has been a shift towards digital journals, as well as while maintaining imprint or journals. So there's been challenges in terms of pedagogical challenges, in terms of how to use them, how to show the importance of both forms and formats in research, in education, and outreach. Today, we're joined by 2 experts in this area of digital printing and in research, and also in print versions. Our guests today is Dan Gall of the University of Iowa Library Systems. Dan Gall is a librarian, social worker. He has worked extensively in outreach programs in the state of Iowa, and he's also worked as a Peace Corps volunteer in Botswana. He's very interested in the areas of looking at the advantages, disadvantages of both print and also digital journals, which he will be talking about today with our other guest, who's Professor Orozco, who's a professor of administration at Universidad Externado de Colombia, Faculty of Administration. Professor Orozco is a member of the National Science Foundation. He's also an editor, an editor and a journalist and a writer in journals administration science. Professor Orozco is from Colombia. He's the associate editor of the Journal of Management History of Emerald Publishing, and he's also a peer evaluator of several journals in this area, in addition to being a researcher in innovation and technology. So welcome both of you to our session today. We look forward to an interesting conversation based on experiences in the 3 areas of teaching, research, and outreach. The format for this talk is as follows. Professor Gall will be speaking to us, introduce himself, tell us a little about his work, what he's been doing in the areas of digital journals, their advantages, disadvantages, and then we'll open this up to questions. Likewise, this will be followed with a brief presentation by Professor Orozco, and this will also be opened to questions. And then finally, we'll open this to a round of questions where both our guests will interact and discuss the issue of digital and print journals. So welcome. Welcome, Professor Gall. It's always nice to talk to people from Iowa. I was there about 30 years ago. That was my first exposure to journals, actually. So that's how I looked you up. So it's always nice to have you here, at least for now online. So we'll let you start with your brief introduction and presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Asana, as well, for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity. A couple things to start off with, just to let you know a little bit about who I am. I am pleased to be misattributed as professor. I am not actually a professor. I do teach some classes now and again, but my role and my expertise that I bring to this conversation is much more as a practitioner, working with students who are using journals, instructors, researchers who are trying to get published in journals, but my focus is very much on the end user, however you want to define that. So what I bring to you is very much a practitioner point of view rather than a theorist point of view. So just to be completely honest with you about that. The second thing I wish to do is thank you all. I poorly speak several other languages than English, but Spanish is not one of them. So I appreciate you being willing and able to conduct this conversation in English. I feel grateful and a little in awe of the ability of people to have in-depth conversations in languages that are not their own. So thank you for that. The other thing that I want to do is tell you a little bit about who I am and where I am. So I am a librarian. I work with and have worked with remote students taking classes off campus or away from campus since 1998. I have done that mainly in the US states of Minnesota, Michigan, and Iowa. So all in the Midwest. Before that, I did spend some years as a librarian working with the National Library Service of Botswana. I was in a public library there, but the idea of distance in that country is very prominent. So the idea of being able to serve users who are not in your building is very much something that I am interested in. With all of that, just to let you know where I am, currently I work at the University of Iowa in the Midwest of the United States. So the red state outlined on the United States map there. And within Iowa, I'm in Johnson County, which is the red outline in the state of Iowa. We are a public university, which means one of the roles that we have, one of the mandates that we have is to serve the people of the state. Mostly that means students coming to our campus in Iowa City and studying on campus, but we do have programs online and remote locations throughout the state of Iowa. So I have been known to travel all the way to the far northwest corner of the state to work with students in other cities. And I work quite a bit with students online. So that's the context for me. The context for the University of Iowa, I don't expect anyone to read all of this, but as a public university, we are on land that is publicly owned, and I like to put us in the context of the history of where we are. So we are a public university founded by people who settled this area, but before we settled here, there were other people that lived in this area and still live in our state and still come to the University of Iowa. So I just want to acknowledge that we are on land that's been lived on for generations before the university got here, and the knowledge there is important as well. To get to the point of our talk today, though, I want to talk and I want us to explore the idea of the advantages and disadvantages of traditionally print publications, journals, versus electronic online publications, and the advantages and disadvantages in each of those formats of presenting information. And I think of this in four major ways: the idea of access and accessibility, the idea of storage, the idea of cost, and the idea of rights or copyrights. And I try to break these things into four distinct categories because I am a mere human and it's difficult to keep everything straight. I like to break it into smaller parts, but all of these things interact with one another. They all weave together and affect each other. So throughout any one of these areas, the idea of rights, for example, will interact with the idea of storage, in that if we buy a print journal, we own that print journal. If we subscribe to an electronic journal, our license may not include actually owning the content as much as having access to the content. And if we don't own it and merely have access to it, we can't store it somewhere. We are reliant on the publisher of the electronic journal to keep it accessible. So all of these things interact with one another, but it'll be very confusing to talk about them all weaving together. So I'm going to break them into smaller parts and we can talk about those a little bit. What I normally do when I work with classes and I talk to classes is invite people to ask questions as I talk. In the context of today, please write down questions. We'll have a little bit of time afterwards that you can ask clarifying questions, and hopefully I will be able to answer them. Before I get into this, kind of the meat of our conversation today, can everyone understand me well enough? Can you hear me well enough? Am I speaking clearly enough that people can understand?
Yes.
Yes, Professor Tan. In fact, we are speaking, so we are hearing clearly, and we can translate the audience questions that they made in YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this conference is available on YouTube online.
Perfect. So I will continue then. Thank you for that. It's good to get a little bit of feedback just to make sure that I'm reaching people the way that I hope that I am. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the idea of access. And as a practitioner, as someone who is not a theorist, I don't have a lot of answers for this. What I can do is ask what I hope are intelligent and clarifying questions. And in the context of remote learners, of students who are taking classes away from campus, the idea of accessing the library is very central to being able to research, being able to be self-motivated learners. So the idea of access means a couple different things. On one level, the idea of access is literally where is the thing that you want to read compared to where you are. I work frequently with students who are located in Sioux City, Iowa, which is in the far northwest corner of the state. And when I drive to go work with those students directly to teach them how to use the library, it takes me 4.5 to 5 hours to drive there. It is impractical for those students to come and use the print journals in our library collection. They are, in a direct sense, inaccessible to them. So we need to find ways to make those print journals accessible, and we do that through scanning to electronic media and delivering them on request. We will also ship books and send things through the mail, but it is not as immediate as a student who has an off-campus apartment 4 blocks away from the library coming in, finding the thing on the shelf, making their photocopy, sitting in a comfortable chair with their cup of coffee and reading the article directly. It's a different situation. So there are advantages and disadvantages to electronic versus print formats. One of those is the idea of accessibility and being able to simply make the thing available where the student is. The other idea of that, the flip side of that, is if you have a print on paper article, assuming that you are able to use your eyes, you can read it. The technology is very simple. It's on paper, you read it. An electronic journal requires you to have a device. You need to have a computer, you need to have an iPad, you need to have something that can read the electronic file and translate it into words that you can understand. So there is an investment ahead of time that a student needs to have. They need to have the equipment to be able to read the online article, which can be very expensive. And those costs are, becoming easier. But at times, the idea of an electronic journal article back in 1995, when I was working in Botswana, the idea of an electronic article, much as it would be very convenient to be able to email it across a wide, vast country, would make things less accessible because most people didn't have the equipment, the technology to be able to read it. So there's balances back and forth. The other aspect with accessibility is, and one of the things I really appreciate about electronic journals, is the idea of screen readers. I work with students who are blind, and they need to be able to read their article. They need to have a machine be able to read their article and speak it out loud to them, which is not something that's easy to do with a print journal. It needs to be digitized somehow in order for a screen reader to be able to read it vocally so that my blind students will be able to understand it. So there's a whole host of things related to accessibility and file formats and things like that that are worth exploring between electronic and print journals. Related to that is the idea of storage. It seems logical that it would be cheaper and easier to store an electronic journal. I can take my thumb drive and put, megabytes or gigabytes of information on a storage device and have it available. But it takes time and it takes effort to make that findable again. So if I have a whole bunch of data on my thumb drive, if it's not organized well, it becomes inaccessible. Same thing with paper on a shelf. It takes time to make it available. It takes time to make it organized so that you can walk down the shelf and find it. We have both open, publicly available shelving. Students, library users can walk down the shelves and find the book themselves and be able to use it. And if they happen to put the book back on the shelf, they might not put it back where it belongs. And then effectively that book is lost. We also have off-site storage with compact shelving we use for archiving. I talked to the manager of that off-site storage. She tells me that it costs $4, in 2009, when the University of Michigan did a study, it costs $4.25 US per book per year to keep a book or a bound set of journals on the shelf, which is a factor to think about in terms of storage. Costs us money. It is more than just putting it on the shelf. It's putting it on the shelf in a way that people can find it. It's putting it, storing it electronically in a format, both that people can find it and that they will be able to read it. Quite a few journals are archived or saved or are published electronically in portable document format, PDF. PDF can be built to work with screen readers. You can make a PDF article that will recognize the individual words and a screen reader can use it. But most PDFs essentially take a picture of the article, and the screen reader only sees a picture rather than the individual words. So depending on how you store things, that affects accessibility, it affects cost. These things all weave together. And there isn't necessarily a correct answer. These are all considerations that librarians, researchers, administrators all need to take into account. I talked about cost. And I suspect that Professor Orozco will go into this in more detail than I will. But there are some other costs involved and some that are hidden in the idea of publishing in different formats. So there are upfront costs to produce articles, to share knowledge. There needs to be writers, scholars in our case, or researchers who spend their time and write the article, generally paid for by their universities or their institution. Articles need to be edited and copy edited to be put into publication. People need to work on layout and making the articles accessible and focusing on different versions of the article, quality control, peer review, distribution networks to get the print journal or the electronic journal out to the subscribers to that journal. And increasingly, one of the things, not necessarily increasingly, traditionally, one of the things that scholars, libraries, readers, people who use the journals really pay for is the reputation of that journal. If you publish in a journal with a good reputation, that affects your career as a scholar. If you publish in a journal that has a less good reputation, that also affects your career as a scholar. So there's a variety of costs, some of which are more expensive for print journals. It costs more to put a print journal on a truck and ship it to the University of Iowa Library than it does to send something electronically. Quite a few of those costs are the same. It costs the same amount of money for a scholar to write an article for print as it does to write an article for an electronic format. It takes the same intellectual skill, the same cost to edit and lay and arrange layout, to go through quality control, to go through peer review. Those costs are the same regardless of format. So the idea that some people have that electronic articles should be cheaper doesn't necessarily hold up, in my opinion. One other thing related to the idea of cost is the open access movement. Rather than publishing in a traditional publishing model, where Emerald, I believe Professor Orozco said was the journal, the publisher of the journal that he edits, rather than Emerald getting the information and selling essentially their article and making their money from people buying the article, open access flips the economics. So the person who's doing the publishing, the person who's writing the article pays the upfront cost to get their information out to a wider audience. And there are some definite implications about quality of the article, about the reputation of journals, about the impact that that article might have. Open access is a relatively new idea, and some publishers are, initially there's sort of a utopian information wants to be free idea about open access, which I believe hit the hard reality of economics pretty quickly. It costs money to produce something of quality. That money needs to be paid by someone somehow. There are various models of open access that we can go into in more detail about the economics of who pays for what. I personally am utopian enough. I see some definite possibilities of open access being able to provide the level of quality assurance, the level of peer review, the level of reputation that traditional publishing now provides. I don't necessarily know that all open access publications, actually, I don't believe that all open access publications are comparable to each other or are comparable to the traditional for-profit publishing model. All that being said, I find it to be a fascinating conversation about who pays to make an article available, who benefits more from making that article available. If I publish in a journal that requires someone to have a subscription to read it, only people with that subscription will be able to read my work. If I pay up front in an open access journal, anybody will be able to read my article and will have a wider reach. My impact will be greater, or at least in theory. It's a really interesting conversation and not one that I have a lot of answers for, but I have a lot of questions. And related to all of these costs is what we're actually selling. Who actually owns the intellectual property? If I write my article and I sign my copyright away to Emerald Publishing needs that, so that they need the rights to be able to republish my work. Ideally, they need the rights to be able to make money off of my work. That's the deal that I'm making as a scholar to get my work out there into the world. If I keep my intellectual property, maybe I can make a deal with Emerald Publishing to put it out there for me and be able to make a profit, but I still keep some of my rights. There's an individual level of the rights question. If I publish in open access, I keep my rights, and I'm making it available to people and basically granting their right to read my work, to use my work, and so on. So there's this kind of individual level of rights. There's also an institutional level of rights that I think is also worth thinking about. Emerald Publishing, as an example, I feel like I'm picking on Emerald right now, and it's only because it's, the company that Professor Orozco is working with. I have actually a great deal of respect for them as a company. Emerald Publishing, for example, or any other academic publisher, publishes information, they make the articles, they distribute them, they make them available to people through subscriptions. Libraries like mine subscribe to those journals, and we may or may not buy the articles. We may or may not own the articles, depending on the license that the academic publishers or the database companies give to us. We may, if we have a print journal, we will be able, pardon me just a moment. One of the joys of working from home is my pets still love me and want to be part of the group. And it's very distracting when I'm talking. I apologize. Institutions, we buy access to the journals. We may, if we subscribe to a print journal, we own our copies of those print journals. They live on our shelves. If we subscribe to electronic journals, perhaps we have the license gives us the right to archive and keep the electronic copies. Perhaps the license only allows us access on the computer servers of the publisher. So we may or may not even own the content that we have, which all makes a difference to our end users in terms of how long they have access to the thing that they want. And also intertwines with all of those other areas about storage. If we store something that we own, we maintain access to it. If we just have licensed access and the publisher keeps it, we don't maintain that access. So all of these things work together. All of these things intertwine. I don't have a lot of answers for the best way or the right way or the correct thing to do, whether it's better to have a print journal or an electronic journal. I do know that there are a whole bunch of different factors that affect how my students are able to access and use material, whatever the format is. And my job as a librarian is to try to make the material that my students need as easily accessible as possible. How that happens, individual cases, changes. So with that, apologize for the cat, but does anyone have any questions for me?
Yes, Professor, we have two questions of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, one of the advantage of digital journals is that they make more easy the spread of open access. So previously in the 90s, what were the strategies to provide open access to information?
I'm not sure that there were many strategies to provide open access, and I may have conflated a couple things as I was talking, but the idea of open access is a copyright thing. I, as a researcher, can publish my material in an open access journal, and it goes out to the world, and no one needs to subscribe to the journal to be able to read it. And we can argue about the minutiae of different open access agreements and licenses, because it is not as binary, two-sided as I just made it sound. But that's the theory. And it kind of implies electronic access. The other more traditional, for lack of a better term, publishing model is I publish my research, I write my article, I publish it in a journal, the journal puts the article out there, and only people who have access to who have subscriptions to the journal, whether that is through your campus library or an individual subscription, have access to that article. One of the tricky things with libraries, though, is we subscribe on behalf of the campus community. And in a public institution like mine, we also make our resources available to members of the community. And our license agreements reflect that. So back in the 90s, if the member of the public wanted to come and read a journal article, they would have to come to the library and get a copy of it, or they would have to go to another library and request it through an interlibrary loan program and get a copy of that article. That doesn't really have anything to do with open access. It has to do with the physical format of the article. Now, if I publish in an electronic journal with the traditional subscription model of publishing, members of our community can still go to the database or the website or wherever it is to find that electronic article, and they can read it. Members of the public can't necessarily use our electronic subscriptions. They can still come into our library in Iowa City and log on to one of our physical computers in the building and read the electronic journal, but their off-campus access hasn't changed at all if they're not a part of the University of Iowa community. And licensing agreements may or may not allow interlibrary loan to other institutions. Generally, they do for journals. Electronic books sometimes don't allow that kind of sharing among institutions. So it's not necessarily made things more, open access certainly makes things more available to everybody in the wider community. Electronic publishing in the traditional format doesn't necessarily make that more available to the wider community. They still need to make their profit. And that is one of the services that publishers provide, is making information available. They are businesses. They need to be able to profit from doing that. Does that answer your question?
Yes. And the other one,
Mm-hmm.
is, do you think that the digitalization of journals increase their importance compared to academic books nowadays?
Do I think that the what of academic journals?
Digitalization, journals in digital.
Digitalization, sure.
Yeah, increase their importance compared to academic books.
I'm honestly not sure. What I see happening, and this, I'm going to get far more theoretical than practical in this answer, and I apologize. I don't have a direct answer for that question. What I see, however, that digitization has done is made everything more granular. So my son is 20 years old. He likes music. His friends really, really like streaming music services, and his friends buy one song at a time from the artists they like. They don't buy the album. They just want their one song. My son is kind of old school. He's very into jazz, and he likes buying jazz albums. He feels that the whole picture, the ways that the songs are arranged with one another, is part of the message, how it's packaged. Same thing with electronic books. You can think of the book itself as the album. Each chapter would be the individual song. And right now, with electronic publishing, it is very easy to just get the chapter that you need. I frequently send chapters of different books, whether it's scanned or starts out electronic if it's an ebook, to my students. They don't necessarily want the whole thing. They just want the relevant chapter. journal articles are very much like that relevant chapter. So I don't necessarily know that digitization has made either journals or scholarly books more important relative to one another. I do think that digitization has made the smaller units within the larger book or the specific article rather than the journal subscription more important for scholars. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. Now we continue with Professor Orozco.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dan, for giving us an overview about accessibility, the advantages and disadvantages of digital print versions, and also some of the legal issues associated with that. We're going to move on to Professor Orozco, who's, as we said, is an editor of a journal and has also been actively engaged both versions. So welcome, Professor, and we'll carry on. And then once the professor is done, we'll probably open up for some more questions. We have until 12:30, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for library for this invitation and the time to share some ideas about the research publications in terms of specifically in journals. So main idea in terms of the institutions, science as institution, is the communication system that depends on the journals that in the tradition of the modern science just rely on an ethos that the people used to value in terms of promote the academic research and then believe that the pieces of papers that are available as publications passes through a process of evaluation and now this publication is important for society, for the community. Is the legitimacy in the institution of science, in the system of communication in terms of peer reviewers that assure that the knowledge and the ideas and the proposals are at least discussed. But the main issue in terms of the publication is the business models behind the production of academic journals, because as Dan talked a few moments ago, we want to have access to the knowledge, and people need, no matter if you have the conditions in terms to be associated or have a subscription or have a links with universities that pay the access for editorials. The knowledge will be open for everyone. So the process to produce the knowledge in terms of academic publication is relies on the core is the peer review process, in which the evaluation just give the idea that the new knowledge is important due to the evaluation of several authors, includes editors and reviewers. But on the other side, there is a pressure for scientists, for professors in the realm of publish or perish. The framework created by the academic capitalism, in which if you don't publish, if you don't fulfill your schedule and justify your time in terms of publications, you will not be able to have a tenure and continue your academic career. So if you want to survive in the academia, you have to publish, and there is no discussion about it. No? And the other issue is who controls the medium. No, in terms of the evolution of scientific communication, the first and I guess the main actor in the production of journals are societies. No, for example, the well-known case of one of the leaders associations in the world, the Royal Society, just published several titles and nowadays offer a package for subscription to the journals, no, for librarians. And you have the faith and you believe that the knowledge that the Royal Society used to publish in their journals are the best that you can, the knowledge that you can trust now. And in the other, in biology, for example, people see Cell, Nature, and Science, the three journals, like the paradigm of publication because the nature of the associations that support them. But there are many editorials that used to promote the science in terms of developing journals for specific topics, and these commercial editorials in which Elsevier is nowadays the biggest one. Just like the image, as you can see there, transform the research into gold in terms of the triple pay. They engage us as editors and as reviewers. The government and university used to pay for research and pay our salaries, and then we just give our time and our efforts and perform our task for free to do the process of edition and peer reviewing, and for the final product, librarians have to buy and pay the highest fees of to the subscriptions. So yeah, it's a big business, about the scientific publication and how these editorials use our work for free, and the triple pay, the government pay the research, pay our salaries, and just to pay for the results. Come on, but this is the reality. In Colombia, for example, the librarians led by the Ministry of Science, Technology, and Innovation and the Ministry of Education created Consortium Colombia, trying to make rebates, to have big discounts in the subscription of those databases from the universities, to open access. No open access in terms of put it online, but pay a more fair tariff, fair prices for subscriptions, and nowadays consortia have agreement with the author Taylor Francis and Xavier Springer says, and it's covered, I guess, probably in terms of private editorials near to the half of the publications available in the market. But the reaction against this big business that I described is the open access. And in Budapest, in 1999, the scholars and researchers in society in the realm of UNESCO just proposes that open science will be the future, and the business model have to change in terms of like plus. If you want to publish, just pay the fee, the cost to put online the new knowledge. But it was some people start to take advantage of this gate and created several and a lot of web page and probably I'm not sure if we can call them journals, and start to find people and say, come on, publish here and become to the editorial board and so on. And there are many, corporations like MDPI, Hungarian Frontiers, for example, that created a big businesses using this business model, this type of put the charge on publication to the researchers. So and it's a big fee. They used to ask about 2,000 euros, something like that. It's a high cost to put a PhD on their pages. But they also started to offer the publication in few days. And for example, MTPI publish near for 400 journals. Each journal have 2 numbers per month, and wow, they used to publish near to 1,000 PDF, near 2,000 PDF per month per journal, and just it's incredible machine to make money now, because they used to ask 2,000 euros for publication. I guess they ask for Swiss francs, but nowadays the confrontation between predatory journals and the other ones just is a war. It's a war to identify what is the best way to promote science for everyone, and to figure out how to prevent the misconduct in science. And I guess this is the main issue that we as researchers and editors have to take have to put forward and make controls to prevent it. In this case, the Economist just described the fraud in medical research in terms of the several retractions of papers that use fake data and create false researches and so on. But the main problem, especially in medical research, is that if you trust in journals, for example, you are a physician in a hospital and you download a paper that said, come on, use beta carotenes before make a surgery and it will be okay, the patient will be better, will improve his pulsations and so on, their beats will be more slow, and the patient will be better. And this case is described in this publication. the use of beta carotene has not been proven at all, and several people just start to die because physicians believe and trust in those publications and just start to um, you know, using these treatments. This is a serious problem. Science is a human right. UNESCO used to promote this slogan. We need a unified concept. Science is a human right. So, but what can we do? I guess there are several issues that we need to talk about in terms of now what will be for the future the best way to create spaces and promote the in the institution of science the communication systems in order to prevent the problems that I described. So thank you, and yeah, we are open for the discussion and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. We have little questions, but for both of you, Professor Dan and you. And the first one is, we would like to know your opinion about the processing fees, the APC, nowadays.
Dan, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to let you take that one. The article publication charge, I think is what I can't remember what the P stands for off the top of my head, but the fee that that a researcher or an author needs to pay upfront to be published in open access journals is what we're talking about. And in theory, in general, I think that it makes sense. Researchers, scholars, publishers, editors, we don't do this for free. I think a lot of people go into the field of education and higher education for very noble, good for society reasons. We want to make our knowledge available wider. We want to, share what we know and make the world a better place. But we still need to pay rent. We still need to put food on the table. So early ideas about open access were, in my opinion, kind of utopian. I mentioned the phrase information wants to be free earlier because there's a librarian who runs a blog, no longer, but about information wanting to be free. Maybe it does, but we live in a world where people need to be paid fairly for the work that they do. So traditionally, you made that money by selling subscriptions to the journal. Open access flips that around, but there still needs to be someone responsible for running peer review, for ensuring quality, for doing the things to try to prevent some of the issues that Professor Orozco was talking about with predatory journals. And that takes investment, that takes money, somebody ought to pay for that. That being said, I'm going to try to share my screen if I can. Let's see here. There is this story in the Chronicle of Higher Education. All right, can you see the "it feels like things are breaking open" article?
Yeah, we can see it.
So this happened in the last few days. This article was published on the 21st. But the editorial board and the kind of the scholars responsible for the journal Neuroimage have all quit en masse from Elsevier Publishing in protest of the high APCs, among some other things, and are trying to start their own neuroimaging journal. They hope to have it up and running, I believe, in the summer. I have to reread the article to get my dates correct. But their point, the reason that they basically revolted and mutinied against Elsevier is because they felt Elsevier was charging too much for scholars to publish in the kind of good reputation, very reliable Elsevier journals. And what they're trying to do is take the authority, the reputation that Elsevier provides, the reputation of their journal, and bring it into open access publication with their expertise. I have no idea how that's going to play out, but I find it a fascinating effort. Elsevier has a very high APC, particularly for this journal, it seems. But I think people should be paid for the work that they do, for editing, for peer review. I think we need to work out how to do that fairly and who should be doing the paying. It'll be interesting to see how this one plays out.
Okay, for me, the APC, article processing charge, is the main problem of open access. If we create especially high rates of APC, probably the development of journals in this system will improve their contribution in terms of published research in a more not like traditional, but in terms of more traceable, more accountable process. No, because the main problem is that if you pay the APC, you get in, and your PDF will be available in 2 or 3 days, no matter what you write. And there are many cases that used to show how organizations like MDPI publish everything, no matter what you send, just pay. That's the main problem, and this create the fake in science, the science in terms of the process of losing the reputation, no? And the other issue is that the main if you create a society in science, because many scholars are aware and want to share their advancements in a specific field, they used to create journals. The issue is who supported it. In the traditional science, in the modern science societies, if you want to be a member, you have to pay for be in the group, and they collect the memberships, and with that money they used to publish their own outlets. No, but the business just explode, especially in the Second World War. People like Robert Maxwell in Pergamon, make a big business, and several editorials just follow him, especially Elsevier, and and just to figure out how to, trying to specialize science, they start to open journals for each topic that could be interesting for scientific community. So they started to put international journal of whatever. And in the 70s, they started to use computer whatever, because computer science, data science was the main issue in that day. So computers in bioeconomics, computers in whatever, and so on. So the businesses create a lot of journals to, have more power to negotiate their subscriptions. I guess we need, in that case, to, as consortia has been advancing, to have more chance to have open source contents, open papers and journals, because those editorials can organize their business in terms of put some of their work online for everyone, and the others, okay, but they need to organize their business, their operation. But in terms of as a fair business, that's the main problem, because they earn a lot of money, billions of dollars with our budgets in the libraries. Yeah, that's a problem. So APC just quit and make a big bargains with private editorials to have more and more open access, then and issues that show universities. In fact, in Latin America, universities used to support the creation of journals supported by university, but it's a very expensive way to share the knowledge. And for example, in Latin America, the main problem, especially in scientific electronic library online, is that we have a lot of papers published in our journals online, but if you see the citation in the mainstream, the people don't use it. And if you review what are the sources that used to cite the literature public in our journals, it's from journals indexed in the Web of Science. Now published especially in private and commercial editorials. And yeah, what can we do about it? That's the main question.
Yes, in fact, this is the next question. What can we do to avoid predatory practices in publishing, especially in universities?
Dan, but go ahead.
It is a thorny issue, and I don't have I have no magic bullet answer. The longer term things that I think we can do as scholars is, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. Individually hold ourselves to high standards. I think is one aspect of this. Another aspect of this is the reward structure for, you had Professor Orozco had brought up the publisher perish phenomenon earlier, which pressures people to get their stuff out there, regardless of how good it is, what the quality is. And I know people that I work with who are interested in alternative ways of showing academic merit, essentially. I work with the School of Social Work here at the University of Iowa. It is an academic discipline that is very rooted in social problems. And, you know, there's a very clinical component to that. So there are efforts among my colleagues to try to change the tenure process to recognize academic achievement and, you know, publishing and doing research in the journals, and a more kind of practical achievement in the state of Iowa. There has to be a balance with this. I think it's a little, you know, it's early stages, and I think it's a little dangerous in terms of scholarship and academicness. But that might be one way to go about it, and kind of looking at what constitutes scholarship. Another way to go about it, another thing that I think might be a possibility, is kind of going back to the neuroscience journal example that I brought up a moment ago. The other, I read, I don't have the citation off the top of my head, but it's a couple of years ago, the Atlantic magazine published an article about a group of scholars who intentionally wrote BS bullshit papers, you know, ridiculous, not particularly good scholarship. And they submitted 20 papers, and something like 15 of the 20 papers to legitimate traditional scholarship journals were accepted for publication. The idea that, you know, there's this idea of quality, there's this idea of needing to publish to make money. You know, the journals have they need to stay profitable. And this idea of expertise. So if the experiment that the neuroscience editorial board is doing right now can remove their role of quality control and ensuring quality, and kind of put it on a more organizational level, or, you know, the expertise of the scholars being the ones who advocate for and protect the quality of the scholarship, rather than that being kind of managed by the publishing company, maybe that will make a difference. Maybe that will make it, you know, put the quality control in a better place for scholarship. It's a little utopian. It's early days for that right now. What I really do think is individually people need to have standards, and academically, institutionally, we need to figure out how to reward that. Not a great answer. I don't think that I've solved the problem just now. Professor Orozco, what do you think?
Okay, thank you, Dan. There are many movements that we have to take into account. For example, I'm going to start with more legal movements. For example, it appears open access library for social science, no e-library, the SNSRN, no, for social science. Just create like a preprint space to share your papers, and no matter if your paper at least was accepted, you can share your work. And a lot of papers that go to the final you know, journals to be published and appears in main journals, their preprint or the you know, the draft are available. no, with the content. So this kind of platforms. The other one was developed by Cornell University, ARCS IB, no? This kind of platforms uh, are, it's the reflection of the movement that wants to open the research and the results to everyone, to democratize science. In the legal aspect, there are portals like Science Hub or LeakGen, promoted by Alexander Erbayan, to put online all the papers and books that are available. And yeah, it's not legal, but it's I guess nowadays the main source to get access to scientific research. I saw, I don't remember where, on the statistics about the access to scientific literature, and Science Group is is very important and very important. The main, in terms of the statistics, the main portal that researchers used to get access and use to find the research papers and books. So I guess, in fact, librarians have to deal with the future of research publication in terms to ask, we will need this big budget to subscribe all the sources, all the access for editorials like Elsevier and the other ones, or we can promote the inclusion of our universities in this kind of initiatives to open the publications to everyone in catalogs and other forms of database that can, like the University of Cornell did, to organize and like pay a big fee once and have the access of the database for a life. There are many issues that we need to discuss, but there are several initiatives that started many years ago, trying to fight against the restriction of access, especially for editorials, the private editorials. And the other issue is that we need to, take care about the APC in the open access systems, because there are many predatory journals that just want your money to put your effort online, without any consideration about the quality or the value of scientific value. But more important is to finish the publish or perish policy. We need to quit the idea that researchers are important if they publish 1, 2, 3 or more papers per year, and the evaluation of researchers in terms of the number of publications need to be stopped. I talked with the Ministry in Science, Technology, and Innovation in Colombia, and talked to him in several ways. We need to close the measure of research group and researchers. It's a corrupt system. We need to stop it. No more pay to publish or publish or perish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Orozco, Professor Gall. This has been a very enriching conversation. Obviously, there is no end to this discussion. Both of you have shed light on the importance and seem to agree of the importance of both print and digital publications. You both shed light on the importance of quality and its role in developing science. The library at Universidad External de Colombia, the Language Center of Universidad External de Colombia, very much thank you for your time and your input. And we look forward to continuing working with you. Perhaps one of the other issues is to see how does all of this also work in our classrooms. This is one of the challenges, which probably could be a topic for a future conference. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Muchas gracias.
Mucho gusto.
Con mucho gusto.
Thank you. Gracias. Una feliz tarde para todos.
Great.
Okay.